All right, so let's bring in our One Detroit contributors, Stephen Henderson of American Black Journal and Nolan Finley of the Detroit News. Hey guys, how are you?
Hey. Good.
You know, that story about I-375, that's going to be a real game changer in terms of how people are getting into downtown Detroit.
Or if they get in at all.
Well, it's going to be definitely different, Stephen.
I am all in favor of this. This is a freeway that should never have been built for any number of reasons. One is that it destroyed a pretty important black neighborhood in Detroit and disconnected people that way. But it also just helps carve the city up, the downtown area, in a way that no other major American city is. If you think of all the freeways that come into downtown and the ways in which they disrupt the flow of traffic otherwise, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I would not only have paved over 375, I would repave the Lodge at least up to 94. There's
so now you're adding on to the project.
I would do all kinds of things to make it harder to get out of the city. The whole idea of this was getting people out of the city in the 50s and the 60s when they used federal money to not only destroy neighborhoods but make it easier for people to get to the suburbs. That's not what we're trying to do now. We don't need to hang on to those vestiges.
Big picture, Nolan.
Well, you've got to deal with today's reality, and the reality today is that we don't have mass transit to speak of. We don't have a train system like most other big cities. We got to move people in and out by car still. And if you cut off the avenues in and out of the city, you wonder about the congestion and how difficult you're going to make working in Detroit and getting back and forth to the city in and out of work. How much are people going to tolerate?
Well, I mean, one of the reasons I think we have a hard time selling people on the idea of mass transit is that we've made it so easy and so convenient for everybody to be in a car by themselves, which is terrible policy. I mean, it's convenient for people, but it's not a sustainable model either for the city or from a transportation standpoint.
Do they have alternatives if you take that away?
You have to grade
so
them.
which do you do first?
And you've seen a lot of changes in the cities with some of the boulevards and streetscapes that have been changing in some neighborhoods, and even looking at downtown, we were talking around the spirit of Detroit, how they've changed the way people are moving around down there.
Yeah, I would close Woodward to car traffic below Grand Circus, where you've got the stadium district now, you've got the light rail going down there, you've got people in the streets now again, pedestrians milling around. Part of the reason that the light rail doesn't work, it doesn't run on time, is because it always gets held up.
It's stuck
in that.
So how are you going to get people into those office buildings downtown?
On the light rail, on other modes of transportation.
Does that have the capacity for it?
Sure it does. I mean, think about other cities. Do you know any other major city in America where you have an 8-lane boulevard that comes right into the center of downtown? It doesn't exist anywhere else. We've created this because of the car and our affinity for it, and I'm not knocking any of that, but it's terrible, terrible transit policy. It's terrible public policy. It makes the city unlivable for anyone who's not in a car.
All right, we'll start adding up to 2024 when this I-375 project
hope
could be done.
You don't expect people to walk in Detroit, for goodness sake.
Well, all right, let's go ahead and take a look at some other things that are happening this week. You know, Nolan, I was thinking about you and watching the UAW strike with GM, and now we're in its 30th day, a month essentially, and they could be getting a little bit closer. But what does this say, big picture, about the power of the UAW, and has this lasted longer than you thought it would?
Well, it's lasted longer than it should have, because GM started out with a pretty good offer. They added $2 billion to that $7 billion offer last week. That should have been enough to settle this. And when you talk to the folks out on the picket line, they seem somewhat unfocused on what they're striking for. Normally you get a strike over wages, not increases. GM's put wage increases and profit sharing increases in this, not trying to take away anything in terms of health care. It seems to be centered on the issue of temporary workers. Well, these UAW strikers have already lost $5,000 to $6,000 each. How much longer are they going to push and sacrifice for temporary workers to get permanent status?
Well, I mean, the whole idea of this strike actually is a throwback to the idea of the union itself, this idea that workers stick together, that workers fight for one another, and injustice to one group of workers is an injustice to all of them. These temporary workers are part of the problem, not just at GM, But in the economy generally, these are people who are paid a non-living wage, essentially. They don't have permanent work. They struggle with health care and other things that we need them to have in order to not be leeching off the system.
They help GM remain close to competitive. And in terms of hourly wages, GM still has a $13 an hour disadvantage over foreign automakers who build cars in this country.
Understood.
That's not insignificant. And GM has
they're a
dealt
problem
with
too.
competitive issues for decades, and
the
they can't take a step back too far in this contract.
The pattern maker can't be the lowest common denominator. This is not a country where we expect people to work for poverty wages. And there are a lot of people who have jobs in auto plants who cannot keep pace with the things that we expect them to keep pace with in their lives. It creates all kinds of other problems in society that we then argue about. Well, how do we make sure that people have health
These
care?
temporary
How do we
workers
make
in the
sure
auto plants are paid at about the average rate for manufacturing workers across the country. The UAW,
but that rate is
the
low.
UAW blue-collar workers are among the elite of manufacturers,
the ones, the
factoring
permanent
workers, not just in America, but around the world.
And they should be. I mean, this is
Nobody's
the
questioning
wealthiest country in America.
These temporary workers help GM manage their workforce, give people time off who are working.
And you're
6
finding
and 7
temporary
days
workers, though,
a
in
week.
every line of work, whether you're in a newsroom
exactly.
or whether you
exactly.
are in a plant.
And it's not a great trend for the economy. It's not a great trend for
Many of them
economic justice
eventually
or any
become
of the things that we
permanent
want.
workers.
Yeah. All right, let's talk a little bit about money. What's going on in Lansing? Are we settled with the budget? Nothing?
Well, Sharkey
yeah.
and Chatfield say the budget's done. They'll live with it.
The governor says she's still
with
open to a supplemental, and I don't know what that means. I mean, does she want them to put back the money she took out, or is she open to
so
negotiating?
far she's put her priorities on the table, but not theirs. And I'm not sure they're going to come back. I think they're content with this $1 billion in unspent money. I do think eventually they'll come together and spend that money, pass a plan for
Eventually,
spending that
though,
money.
but when is that?
But they're not in any hurry.
Well, I actually want to give the governor some credit here for showing more backbone than previous Democratic governors have shown when they had Republican legislatures, and saying, look, if you don't cooperate, if you don't bargain at the table in good faith, I'll punish you. And I think that's a lever that's got to be available to the governor, and she's working better than just rolling over.
She left the table a month early, 3 weeks early before the deadline. She's got no room to accuse anyone else of not coming to the table.
We've had this argument. They
good
were gone
faith.
all summer. They weren't at the table.
She left the table 3 weeks before the deadline, and then
because they weren't making any progress.
Then thought she would bring the Republicans back by vetoing things that are important to their constituencies, but also things that are important to a lot of folks in Michigan. She heard a lot of the more vulnerable groups thinking that people would pressure lawmakers to come back. So far, that's backfired on her.
Yeah,
it hasn't worked.
It hasn't worked in the practical terms she wanted. It probably works in political terms, though, in the sense that she did not roll over for their shenanigans, which included taking the summer off when there was no budget.
All right, speaking about politics, we got the news last week that University of Michigan is going to be the site of one of the presidential debates in October 2020, further catapulting Michigan into the most lauded state status when it comes to this presidential election.
Right. It sort of assumes that the Republic is still standing at that point. And that
oh,
we're
really? You
having
think
a
it's going
presidential
to crumble
Who
at
knows,
this point?
Right.
Well, there are 3 debates. Michigan's getting one. Where are the other
5
2?
debates, I think. Well, 4. 3 presidential and one
vice presidential.
Oh,
There's 3 presidential debates. Michigan's getting one.
There was one in Nashville at Belmont. There was one at I don't remember.
But it's mostly in the center of the country. It's an interesting lineup. The coasts are being left out, and it does it does really signal where the battle will be this time.
Pushing the squeeze there, right in the middle.
It'll be in the middle of the country.
Yeah. A couple minutes left. What are you guys looking forward to? What should we be looking for in the news coming up?
Well, I mean, I am still blown away by this video of the president shooting a spoof video.
A spoof video that was
shooting
put
members
together.
of the national media and liberal groups. We're waiting as of Tuesday this week for him to say something about this video and distance himself from it. He hasn't. He's busy on Twitter attacking other people.
On day one, the White House put out a statement saying he condemns the video.
Saying he hadn't seen it.
And he said he condemns it and hadn't seen it. So you can't say he hasn't condemned it. I mean, it's a despicable video. Whoever put it out, I mean, it's indicative of where we are as a country. I mean, you had two videos go viral yesterday, that one and the one of the young woman coming out of the Trump rally getting punched in the face. And it does speak to where we are in this country in terms of how we think we should practice our politics and what's okay and what's not okay.
Yeah, and images continue to be powerful. What I get concerned about is if people start to doctor images and play with images and video as we move forward with this.
They're absolutely going to do that. Yeah. And it's going to be done in the 2020 election in a far more sophisticated way than this ridiculously offensive, hackneyed video that was shown. You're going to see people on video saying things they never said.
No.
And you won't know whether what's true and what's not true.
Yeah, it brings fake news to a whole different level,
Yes,
right?
it does.
All right. Thanks, guys. It's good to see you.